Hi, I'm Sarah Baker. Welcome to Momma Stories. I created Momma Stories after seeing how impactful sharing stories can be in overcoming the challenges of motherhood. I am where I am today because of the stories of so many amazing, strong mamas. And I want to share that with anyone I can. So follow along to laugh, cry, and be empowered. Welcome to the show. Today we have Cynthia here with us. Cynthia, thanks for joining us.
Wonderful to be here, Sarah.
Well, for those of us who don't know Cynthia, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Okay. So my name, again, is Cynthia Klein, and I'm what's considered a parenting expert. So I work with parents individually, helping them improve their relationships with their kids. I also do a lot of public speaking to groups. I also am an author about parenting work as well. And so my mission is to help create greater harmony in families. My past, I was an elementary school teacher. Before that, I got my degree in psychology, but I've always been an educator. So I'm here to help parents understand more about themselves and how they can become a parent that they really feel confident.
Awesome. Okay, so parent expert, parent educator, what is that? Like if you were to explain that to somebody, what is that?
You know, I was thinking about that today, and I think an analogy, I think of if you got your child a tutor. So let's say, your child's in school, they're in class, and there's a couple subjects that they kind of need individual help with. So you would hire or take them to a tutor. So that person will give them one-on-one help. And so really, as a parenting expert, you can go and see us as in a group, like I teach a lot at schools, or you can also see us one-on-one as like a tutor. And what's important for a parent to actually come to a parenting expert privately, we need to get out of the belief that you should know how to raise your kids. That if you don't know, that something's wrong with you. And this is a barrier that a lot of parents have to getting the that they need.
Well, I can tell you I've had to overcome that barrier, and I would say I have to overcome it most days, just reminding myself that, I should have a little bit more grace, because it's not that I'm really well trained in this subject as we might think that we are when it comes to parenting and its everyday struggles.
Yeah. We parent the way we learned, right? Like any subject, anything that we learned, we know we learned from seeing action. So how we were raised as kids, that's how we learn to parent, or, parents kind of pass it down. So that's how it was always taught, right? A mother would teach the daughter or the son, more the daughter, how to raise children to be a certain way in a society.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's changing now. Society is changing now.
For sure. Well, and I will say many generations ago, that worked because you kind of just were in your own bubble and in your own space, and you could really live in your home and make decisions for your family. And I think today we live in a world where our life, whether we choose to or not, is really on display with social media, or we have access to other people's lives, or there's all these different types of theories and educations. And so now it's like, it's not as easy to really have that, like, okay, I'm just going to do what's best in between my four walls. Cause I guess the benefit is we have all this information, but then the hurdle is, what do I do with all this information, and how do I implement it into my life?
Yeah, it isn't like a group, everybody believes in the same way of raising children.
Right.
You see, so now we're like looking at, it doesn't have to be this way. And so now as a parent, we can we think, psychology started, in the 50s, 60s, right? Before then, there really wasn't self-reflection. So now we're in an age of tremendous self-reflection. We don't just do the way things were done before, right? We're looking at, how do I improve it? So every parent will say, well, okay, I like this way that I was raised, but I don't like these ways. So how do I change it? So a lot of parents will say, "Oh, I don't want to act that way. I don't want to be yelling at my kids." However, they don't know how to replace it.
Yeah.
And that's I come in.
Yeah. Well, and that's really cool. I'm excited. I know later on in the episode we're gonna get a little taste of more of what you do as a parent expert. But I just think it's cool to even have people like you in this profession that are helping us with that reflection, because I just think there's so much on our plates as parents, and there's so much in the world and advice. And I mean, just how anybody can even take that in. I mean, you have to have some sort of sounding board, I would say, outside of your family to really analyze what it is that you want to change, right? Like some of that stuff that we were taught when we were kids and that has now come into our parenting is almost so ingrained in us that we might not even notice it. So it takes a lot of
you
time.
don't. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that you wrote a book. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your book and just kind of the general idea of the book, and then I know we'll dive a little bit more into that later.
Okay. So I've been working with parents about 26 years now, as I said, as a speaker and as a private coach. And so I'm working with all these parents, and I needed to write things down. So I started writing articles for a parenting magazine. And then people kept asking me, my clients kept asking me, when are you going to write a book? When are you writing a book? Because basically they liked the way I was presenting things, and they needed it to be written down. So I wrote, it's called Ally Parenting, A-L-L-Y, not Allie, Ally Parenting, a non-adversarial approach to transform conflict into cooperation. Because I really saw working with parents, a lot of them were adversarial with their kids. Like they blamed their kids. They saw their kids as in a negative way, and they were always trying to change their children, and that wasn't helping. So with this book, Ally Parenting, which you can find on Amazon, it's an Audible and soft cover and also e-book as well. What it is, it's a guide to teach what language is effective. So I work on language. What are the words you're saying? Are they effective or not? And I help parents in 3 areas of communication with their children. So I help them as a director. So when you're trying to get your kids to do something they don't want to do, such as cleaning the bathroom, you have to use certain language. You don't have to, but I recommend certain language that will help get your request or your intention across in a more effective way. And then there's times that you need to be a collaborator with your kids where you need to solve problems together. So I teach parents language that seems to be effective. And then the third area is, as a supporter, when your child is having their own struggles, what kind of language can you use to support your child? And we'll actually be talking more about this later in the skit we're going to do as a supporter. So it's all about figuring out what you're doing that's not working. So I have, in the beginning of the book, I have an evaluation tool. So important. You don't want to just try all these different strategies. I teach an evaluation tool one by one, so you can figure out what is it that I'm not doing just right. And then I teach very specific skills, language, a lot of language, what works and what doesn't work. And it's great. Short chapters, get to the point, and men love it.
Well, and that's always perfect for a parent's brain, right? It's like as much as we can take on with the lack of time that we have sometimes. Well, during this time, you mentioned a lot about the different things that you do in your work and like teaching and, obviously your one-on-one time with your clients and all of that. So obviously in our current climate, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. How has your business changed and adapted to what we have right now?
It's interesting. I was talking to somebody about that today, and what's happened is because parents are with their kids so much now, any of the issues that they had before are becoming more and more pronounced.
Yeah, I bet.
Right. And this actually, because they're more pronounced and you're with your kids more, this is the perfect time to actually get parenting help in guidance because you have so many opportunities to try the new strategies out with your kids.
Yeah.
And so I would say the biggest thing is that you're just stuck with them so much that what it hasn't been working before becomes very clear, and that it's an opportunity. And I guess the other thing, that's why we're going to use the supporter role in our skit, is that kids are really struggling and parents are struggling, and for parents to learn how to really listen to their kids, what they're going through, so that kids feel they have an outlet of a parent who knows how to listen and support, that's kind of really crucial now. That skill of being a supporter, learning how to do that, I think that is even more important now than ever. Yeah.
And I could not agree more. I mean, I'll tell you that obviously when we were talking about setting up this interview, I mean, and you kind of mentioned to me how some of your clients are kind of seeing an increase in some of this. And, oftentimes in life, we can just kind of go on autopilot, right? We can just go about our days and because it takes work to work on those things that we were taught that are ingrained in who we are. And, maybe things are just kind of smooth sailing in our family. But, global pandemic aside, you just never know when there's going to be some sort of hiccup in your life. And it could be something so massive as what we're dealing with today, or it could be something much smaller in the four walls of your own home. And I just think it's so important for parents to have support from you or, people in this industry so that they understand how to do exactly what it is that we're going to talk more about, but how they can just help support their children. Because you just never know when mayhem's going to hit. You never know when you're going to be faced with these difficult times. And so it's so important as parents that we start this foundation now versus waiting until we're kind of in the thick of it. And now we're taking on a lot of fear and a lot of stress and a lot of just other things from outside sources. And now we're trying to work on all these other things with our family and all these other ways that we parent and become the supporter and, all these challenges that we had no clue even existed.
And there's a thing about telling kids what to do. That, like, a lot of parents know that being a director, I need to make sure my kids do their homework, do their chores. So that seems very natural, like I'm supposed to do that, right? And some parents are better at it than others. And then some parents kind of, okay, I want to do problem solving with my kids. I need to be the collaborator. I need to know that. But the issue of learning how to be an emotional support to a child struggling is very, very foreign to almost all parents I work with. And I had to learn it. I didn't have a clue. My daughter now, I didn't say that, but she's 31, married, and maybe in a couple of years she'll have her own kids. But I had to really learn how to be her support because she had some really difficult times from some other kids in school. And so it forced me to learn how to be there for her when she was struggling, because we have so many kids that can't go to their parents, right? This has been going on for a long time. We've got suicide and other issues and other problems. And so I feel that it's not like the parents are responsible for how their children are. We can't control them. However, parents can learn the language that will be helpful for their kids to hear and language that isn't helpful. And that's what I hope we can kind of touch on today, how to not block communication, because kids really need to know. I really wanted to be a parent that my daughter, when things were hard and when she was away and at college, that she felt when things were really difficult that she could actually call me and I would be able to respond to her in a way that she felt heard and respected and supported.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing I'll say before we jump into, to going into more of like the supporter role, and then obviously we'll get into our role plays, but just for the parents out there, and I know you can attest to this too, like this takes time. Like this isn't something where you try it once and then it works.
No.
Like this takes time and, you having the time to reflect and to evaluate. And so even just reading a book and doing it, I think is one thing, but reading a book and having somebody there, that third party person that's really assisting you and is that sounding board when things go wrong and that cheerleader when things go right. I just think that's what takes it to the next level, because there's just so many things. Like, I read books all the time and I try to do the things that it tells me to do. But if I had, Brene Brown sitting next to me teaching me how to be vulnerable in certain moments, I'm sure I would be a lot more of a well-rounded, individual. And so as we go through this role play, I just want those listeners out there, as they're thinking like, oh, that wouldn't work, or, I don't know if I could do that with my child. I just want to let you know, like, yeah, you're probably right. Like, the first time it's probably not going to work. But if you have consistency and a sounding board and somebody who's helping assist you through this, like these types of conversations can exist in your family and can exist in your life. It just takes time to learn a new skill. And that's what it is. It's learning a new skill of how to communicate with our kids.
And being willing to say, I'm going to be the one to change.
Yeah.
So I can only work with parents who stop saying, my child needs to change, if only they would, instead of, what do I do differently? Because we've got the parent-child equation. On one side of the equation is what the parent feels, thinks, says, and does, and then the other side is what the child thinks, feels, says, and does. And we have influence over our kids. We don't have control, but we do have influence. And over again, I've seen where parents make changes, and they'll tell me, oh, my gosh, they made a change because I recommended it. They didn't quite believe in it, but then they saw a change in their child. And I just want to make one other comment, Sarah, about when you were saying about getting an outside perspective. I'm working with this couple, and I'm also, today I worked separately with the husband, and I'm going to work with the mom separately. And, he was able to just say to me, okay, just tell me straight from what you've heard. And I've been working with him about 2.5 months now. From what you've heard, tell me, what is it where I'm on track and where I'm off track? And it was so great because, I have no judgment about parents, whether you're good or bad. I don't even think about that. I just think about, well, this is working, this isn't working, why don't you try this? And he was so appreciative. I was saying also things about words that he was saying that might be triggering his wife, and talking to his wife about communication blocks. And he was just taking diligent notes. And at the end, he had a couple things, that he's going to be focusing on. And yet he could no way figure that out on his own.
Right. Well, and how could you, I think it's, as parents, we just have to get into, what's going on in our four walls, what are we struggling with, and who can we reach out to for help? Because it's not easy. And I think it's remarkable to hear you say that a client says that, like, just for them to realize and get to that point, like, okay, there's obviously an equation, there's a part of this equation that I am, I'm affecting. So why don't you tell me what I can do to change it and hopefully get the outcome that I want? And I just think that that's a testament to what you do and what you can offer parents.
And what was so beautiful about this is the wife, they came and heard me speak at a school, and that's where they first learned about me. And she's been wanting to get help for them for many, many years, and he didn't want to, but he heard me speak, and he liked me, and I was an educator. And it took about 2 months of us working, about every week. We'd have a 1-hour call before he was like, he just all of a sudden really opened up and was able to really trust and do that self-reflection. So when he was doing that with me, it was really, really beautiful. It made me feel so proud of the work that I do, that this person trusted and would start to self-reflect and make changes. So it was very exciting. Now I'm going to talk to the wife tomorrow.
That's so good. Well, I'm so glad to hear that. It's nice to know you can alleviate some stress for parents, because this parenting thing is very difficult. I don't care who you are.
Oh, it was so hard for me. I went to my own parenting coach. I was studying it while I was raising my daughter, taught classes, and I went to my own coach. It was like I needed an outside perspective as well. And I also want to say to parents, I I work with parents and they wait till their kids are like 13 and the problem's been going on for 6, 7 years. And they kept hoping it would get better. By the time your kids are 13, it's tough to make changes. I work with some parents that are teenagers, and I'll do that. But if parents can start when their kids 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because during that time when they're young, they still really look to their parents, and they really want to have great relationships. If you have a going up to 13 years where it's been a stressful, difficult relationship where trust has been broken over and over again, it's more difficult to repair it. I wouldn't say it's impossible. I do work with parents of teens and even young adults, but I just want to encourage parents, please don't keep waiting and hoping your kids will outgrow it.
Yeah.
They'll change.
Okay, well, why don't you introduce us to, I guess, a little bit deeper of the supporter role, and then we'll jump right into our role plays where I'm going to play the child and you're going to play an adult. Does that sound good?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. I really want to talk about the third role, the supporter. I mentioned the director telling kids what to do, the collaborator, problem solving together. Supporter is when it's their problem to solve. Friendship is one issue, but in this role play, I want to talk about when kids are expressing their hurt feelings or negative feelings about having to be at home and what's going on with the pandemic. And so we're going to be doing the first kind of 2 steps. The first step of being a supporter, all of this is in my book, Ally Parenting. So step by step. So if you like what you're hearing, you go, just go Amazon Ally Parenting by Cynthia Klein, and it's all in there. Okay. So the first thing is when a child, or this applies to a friend or an adult, if they express some negative feelings they're having, is how we respond either opens up and keeps communication going, or it blocks communication because there's some sort of an underlying message that they hear. We might not know about it, but in some way they feel it. So we're going to be going through the skit and going to be showing some blocks. Like one of the blocks we're going to be doing is called placating. And this is when your child's upset and you want to try to make them feel better by saying things to take away their feelings. Another might be if you're like being a know-it-all. If your child is saying about how they're feeling and you're acting as though you understand them and you know them. And if the underlying message is like placating is like you shouldn't have those feelings, I don't want to have your feelings, even though you're trying to make them feel better, if they get the message of you shouldn't have those feelings, don't have those feelings, and you don't know what you're feeling, the child starts to doubt themselves and they shut down. So we're going to do a role play where I'm going to be using some communication blocks with you. And then the second step, we're going to be another role play where we're going to go through it again, the same role play, and I'll be explaining why it was a block. So you can also hear why it was. And then we're going to go through it again. And what I'm going to be doing is instead of blocking you, I'm going to be using what's called empathetic phrases. This is just where I'm just trying to respond so in tentative ways just to allow you space to keep venting and express. So this whole point is I just want my child to feel that I'm there for them, hearing them, trying to make them feel better. So that's what we're going to be trying. Okay. So I think it'll be fun.
Well, just so you know, in my previous job, I used to have to do role plays all the time because I taught a sales class. But I don't know how well I am over a podcast, but we'll try. I've got my script, so we'll see how I do. Are you ready for me?
I am ready. Okay.
All right.
Go ahead, chat.
I'm the child. Okay. I want to see my friends. I'm so tired of being home. I'm missing the field trip too. I'll never get to go on it.
Oh, I know this is hard, but we need to make the best of it.
You don't understand. You never had this happen to you.
No, I didn't have this happen to me. It hasn't been too bad, has it? We've had some fun, too.
You never listen to me. When is this going to be over?
Oh, honey, I know it's hard for you. Let's think of how you can gather your friends together over Zoom.
I don't want to do it over Zoom. I miss seeing my friends.
I'm just trying to help.
I don't want your help.
Okay. Okay. What do you have any input you want to say before we go on about that, Sarah, about how that felt to you, what I was saying?
Yeah, well, sadly, it feels really familiar. Not that I've had these conversations with Grayson yet, because he's obviously much younger, but it just kind of feels like a natural conversation I've either seen displayed in movies or displayed friends or my own experience, where it sounds like the adult is trying to find like the silver lining on things and trying to fix what's happening, which I think is our natural reaction. Like I for sure do this just in general. I try to fix things, where I think maybe what the child is asking for without having the words to do it is just for their feelings to be allowed to be felt.
Okay. Yes. And so let's go through it again,
Okay.
and you'll say your part, and then I might make a comment about it to help clarify it.
Okay. Perfect. Are you ready?
Yes, ready.
I want to see my friends. I'm so tired of being home. I'm missing that field trip too. I'll never get to go on it.
Okay, so right here, I would think is so let me clarify. A lot of times when I work with parents, I ask them to write out a script of what they said to a child.
Okay.
And that way they write out the script. And so I might get this script from the parent, and then this is how I would respond to help them understand why what they were saying wasn't working. So here I would say, listening to you, that you are in an emotional state. What's called the limbic system is the emotional part of the brain, and you are in an emotional state. And so when a child is emotional, then they can't be logical. And so the first thing is realize they're emotional. You don't want to be logical and result. Okay. So then the adult, I said in response to you, I know this is hard, but we need to make the best of it. So this is, again, this is like placating. So I'm trying to be empathetic because I say the word I know. However, when you say I know to somebody, like I know how you feel, that can feel like a know-it-all. That can feel like I know about you and you don't know about you, like I'm analyzing you.
Okay.
And then what I said, I know this is hard, but we need to make the best of it. I put in the word but. And when you do an empathy at the beginning, I was trying to, I know this is hard, and then I put the word but, everything I say after that is more important, but we need to make the best of it. So sense of empathy gets lost when you put the but in there.
Yeah.
And then I moralize some, and I give advice. So it's packed full of a whole bunch of communication blocks that does not make you feel heard and connected to.
Yeah. Well, and even just saying, even if you didn't say but, and you just said we need to make the best of it, it's kind of like, well, you're not really acknowledging the bigger issue, which is, this amount of fear this child must be feeling because their life has completely changed.
Exactly. Pushing it aside.
Yeah.
Pushing it aside. Yeah.
Okay, the next one. You don't understand. You never had this happen to you.
No, I didn't have this happen to me. It hasn't been too bad, has it? We've had some fun, too. So here, it's good that the adult did admit that they haven't had it happen to themselves. But again, there's a lot of this particular parent that we're role-playing feels a real need to make their child feel better. They probably feel helpless, right? They don't know what to do. Their child's upset, and so they're trying their best to make them feel better. But it's not working, is it?
Right, no. Well, and I think I almost don't even think that it's terrible. I just think before this, again, I'm not an expert, but if they just would have allowed more time for the emotion to kind of be out in the open and for the child to talk about it, maybe this sentence wouldn't be too terrible. It just is that it's just another way of shutting the child down.
exactly. So your point is really great, because words that we say, a lot of times it's when they're said as well. So you're right. So if the child had been listened to already and heard, then you might be able to say, well, then you might be able to go to the positive.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, here's the next one. You never listen to me. When is this going to be over?
Okay. So right away, the child says, you never listen to me, and that word never is a real trigger, right? The parent's probably thinking, I do listen to you, and so it's going to be really hard for the parent to not become defensive, okay, first of all. And so here the parent responds, I am listening to you. Let's think of how you can gather your friends together over Zoom. So, like you didn't feel heard because you told me that. So you told me I don't listen to you, and I say I am listening. So there's a disconnect.
Yeah. I will say the word never is a trigger for me too. Like Grayson for sure at times will say, you never do this. I mean, he's pretty young, but I'll get very defensive, whether it's something I say out loud or just an emotion I feel inside. But I for sure get defensive when it's just not true. Like I feel like I do those things, maybe not 100% of the time, but I do.
Right. And the tricky part is when somebody's saying that in that moment, it feels like it. They're feeling so hurt. And so the tricky part is to not respond to that never, and to just acknowledge that they're feeling some sort of hurt. And that's the tricky part.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to do it over Zoom. I miss seeing my friends.
Okay. And so what's interesting about this is I made a suggestion to do it over Zoom, and you might think it's a great suggestion, but you're just not going to hear it from me, are you?
No. Well, and I think, just like I'm defensive over the word never, this child's defensive over the, many times that they have expressed frustration and there hasn't been a place for them to really talk about it.
Yeah. And then the parent responds with, I'm just trying to help. So now the parent feels frustrated and helpless, and the wall goes up between the parent and the child. And this is what I love to help parents about the communication blocks. When I learned about this, which we're going to now do a better way of responding, when I learned when somebody's expressing their upset, how to respond in a way that helps them keep talking about it so they feel heard, it opened up all of my relationships.
It
makes a difference.
Sorry, do you suggest that people don't ever even say that sentence, that I'm just trying to help sentence? Or can you think of a time where that actually even, I can picture myself saying that in times, and I feel like that response is just so, I guess, passive in a way. It's like my way of being like, you're unhelpable and I just really want to help you, but you just clearly can't use my help.
Yeah, that's an interesting, I'm just trying to help. It's like, it's a total disconnect. Like they're saying, this, what you're doing is not helping. And then the person saying, I'm just trying to help, is totally in their own world.
Yeah.
You're not at all available. So you're trying to make excuses. Parents make a lot of excuses for what they're saying. Like, a child gets mad at them. You're always yelling at me. And the parent says, well, if you picked up your, clothes as soon as I told you to, I wouldn't get mad at you. This is kind of the same thing. It's like the child's trying to give us information, and we're all people, right? We've got emotions like everybody, and then becoming defensive. And this is a big thing that happens like when you're trying to help kids with homework.
Yeah. I'm so thankful I don't have to do that, by the way. Kudos to all the parents who are in the thick of that right now.
So that same statement, if the parents are trying to help the kids and the kids say, that's not right, or that's not the way it's done, or the teachers aren't doing it, and the tendency that parents, well, I'm just trying to help, it builds up a wall.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the child responds with, I don't want your help.
Right.
So at this point...
everyone hurt, everyone feeling bad, and the parents going, what happened? like,
Yeah.
My child's hurting. I love my child. I'm trying to be there for them. I'm trying to make them feel better. And it's just blown up in my face.
Yeah. I would challenge anybody who's listening to this to write down as much as they can verbatim the last time something like this has happened, where there's been like this conversation that just never gets resolved. Because even as we go through this, I'm kind of like, well, maybe it didn't happen exactly like that. Like in my own experience with certain things, I think you'd be pretty surprised. Like, this is pretty spot on of like how we as parents want to fix it. We want to, assert ourselves to help address the problem and make it go away. But the bigger problem is that we're not taking the time to really let our kids have the feelings that they're having. And it could be, something in response to this pandemic, or it could be something in response to something totally different. But yeah, I mean, I feel like even just as you broke this down, I could see in my mind where when we first read it, I didn't think anything of the, like, I'm just trying to help response. But now as we read it slower, I'm kind of like, wow, that's kind of a crummy thing for me to say. Because what is my point I'm trying to get across? Like, that's really just a selfish term for me. Like, if I'm saying I'm just trying to help, that's my way of giving myself kudos, even though it's breaking down.
Exactly. Like, you should understand me.
Right.
It's not about. So, what? I just had a thought, Sarah. You just made a wonderful suggestion asking parents to write down a dialogue like this. So any parent who does, and I give a free 45-minute consultation over Zoom to anybody who wants it, if they contact me and through my website and want a free session, and we could go over that with them, and I could help them analyze.
Cool. I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now what we're going to do is you're going to start out with the same phrase. I'm going to respond differently. I'm going to try to be empathetic. Now, I'm not doing what's called reflective listening. Reflective listening is when you're saying back to the child what you hear them saying. That is something you do when you're actually farther on and you're doing problem solving. You don't do that when you're right now I'm just giving them space to vent. So there's a real big difference between empathetic and reflective listening.
Okay.
Okay, let's see how this goes.
Okay. I just want to see my friends. I'm so tired of being home. I'm missing the field trip too. I'll never get to go on it.
These times are really hard. Or I could say, you seem pretty upset about what you can't do.
Okay. So you're saying just that simple statement, like these times are really hard. And just letting like space there so your child can fill in the next statement.
Exactly. And that's like for a thinker. So I'm not saying feelings, or I say you seem pretty upset about what you can't do. That's like for a feeler, I say you seem, and that's all I say. I just say one phrase and I stop.
Okay. Okay, here's the child's response. Yes, it's awful and it isn't fair. Then I have to wear a mask too.
So you see here, the child is elaborating more because I haven't shut them down.
Yeah.
So as an adult, I could just respond, it is awful. Or I could also say, basically, it's just awful. I'm not judging it. I'm not saying you should feel this way. You shouldn't feel that way. I'm just giving space.
Okay. Wow, I feel like that's hard for parents to do. Well, let me back up. I feel like that's hard for me to do. I sometimes want to fill the silence. And so I think this would take a lot of work on my part of just being able to let that space kind of sit there.
Yes, it does. And during this time, the child might cry. They might need a hug. Let's say that, they do. You're just there. It was a big challenge for me. I never had this done to me. So I didn't know how, but I was so determined to have a great relationship with my daughter. So if your child starts to cry, gets upset, just put your arms around them. I'm here for you. The parent could say, we'll get through this together. That's one possibility. But really, it's just letting them. What other thoughts do you think a child might express?
Well, and I think I mean, I don't know. I mean, it depends, right? I mean, it could be this, pandemic. So it could be like virtual learning is really frustrating to them. Maybe they're have an increase on some sort of social media platform. So they're getting bullied in a way that they weren't before.
Mm-hmm.
They, they had a crush and the crush now likes someone else because, they don't see him every day. Like it just could be some of the most biggest things or some of the smallest things. And I think if you just let that space be there, who knows? Because even the response of like, then I have to wear a mask too. Like as a parent, I know this is going to sound terrible, like I'm a bad parent, but I would almost roll my eyes on that. Like you don't really have to wear a mask unless you're out in public, and we can avoid being out in public, right? Like I guess I should speak from more of like in my situation, Grayson and I can avoid being out in public. So that response in my situation might feel like more of an eye roll, but that might not even be the real issue. Like wearing the masks is just the child verbalizing a different way. I hate this pandemic. I hate what this has done to my life. It's not that they actually have to wear a mask. It's just that they now are missing out on things that they were really looking forward to, and they're associating it with wearing a mask because that's their physical, tangible thing that they're doing with this current climate.
And what I love is the idea, the eye rolling. So that we have to be so careful of our judgment because a lot of parents feel that's not such a big deal. Why are you so upset about it? All of these thoughts can be going on inside of our head that are judgmental and putting down what the child's expressing. And just be mindful about that. Be aware that, my God, right now I'm being judgmental. I'm not I don't like bad or good parent, just that's what's happening, and I need to put that aside. So I might respond, it's hard wearing a mask, or, it's uncomfortable. It's kind of hard to breathe.
Yeah.
So to give more space for them to vent, or about the field trip. You were really looking forward to going on the field trip. I know fifth graders, a lot of them, out here go on the field trip. So the idea is you want to give them space. So you know what it does? It builds trust. Like the child learns that I can express what's going on. My parent or adult or whomever, grandparent, knows how to listen, not criticizing me, not trying to make me feel different. Then after the venting's over with, you might be able to get to the point of kind of discussing ideas.
Yeah.
Like, okay, honey, well, would you like to talk about what to do about any of these issues you brought up?
Would you ever suggest like, when you were saying like the mask thing and you were like, yeah, masks are uncomfortable as the adult's response. Would you ever say like, what about it? What about the masks bother you the most? Like what about that is making you uncomfortable or making you upset?
Absolutely. Because if your child trusts you and they talk about it more, because they can talk about it if they know that you value what they're saying and maybe you're going to help them find a solution.
Okay.
Because we don't want to feel powerless. There's, this pandemic, we can't fix that overall, right? But what can we do as individuals to feel like we have power?
Yeah.
So I want to read what I had down here for option 2, like moving on to problem solving. So what the adult could say, there are many challenges right now. Would you like to talk about ideas of what to do?
And then the child says, okay, I just wish it wasn't so hard right now. Or the child might say, I'm okay now.
Right. And then I could say, me too. You mentioned about friends, the field trip, and math. Do you want to talk more about any of these?
I guess we could talk about friends.
Okay. Yeah. Any friends in particular. And then we would go into kind of like more of a problem-solving process. So they started out, they were venting. You really worked on not doing blocks, like giving advice, placating, interrogating, a lot of blocks. I have a whole chart in my book. I love the blocks. I have a whole chart. You can understand all of them. And then we went through, I avoided blocks, used empathetic phrases to help the child vent. And this is all what I teach parents. So they come to me with what they're saying, and I give them exact words to try instead. So then you feel confident.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're through with, okay, my child's venting. Then we can work on how do you actually do problem solving together where your child makes the final decision for a lot of their own personal problems. It's a beautiful experience to have with a child to just, know what to say. And the more that you have an incident happen and you write it down and you review it, then you can plan what you're going to do next time, because situations come up over and over again. They're
Sure.
never just one. Right?
Sure.
And then you can say, okay, right in here, and that's where a parenting expert is really helpful. Okay, right here, you gave advice or you did placating, and this is why it was hurtful. Why don't you try this instead? And this is something on one's own. It's very difficult to do because we're only from our own perspective. And so I really hope parents think about how can I talk in a way that will open up bridges communication, because this is what kids need right now more than anything. They need school, but they need more than anything to have a place where they can vent their frustrations that are going on. After they've expressed all these hurt feelings, it's hard to just be okay.
For sure.
Now, not all kids want to go through and discuss solutions together. My daughter didn't, and she still doesn't. She's very independent. And so I didn't do a lot of discussing with her about different ideas. I did a lot of the not blocking and the listening, because that allowed her mind to clear. Because when you vent and the emotions come out of the limbic system with a good listener, then you can look at them, get the feelings out, and then it gives space for actual thinking to happen, because the emotions come from the limbic system. Once they're released, then you can think. And so my daughter often did a lot of thinking on her own. And she continues to do that. She'll call me up about a kind of decision she needs to make about something, okay? And she'll think, and she's not saying, she never says, Mom, what do you think I should do? No, that would not come out of my daughter's mouth. She kind of says, well, I'm trying to decide on this. And she'll say some things, and I just kind of might throw out a couple thoughts. I never say you should. Yeah. So she and then she's kind of like, well, okay, thanks. And then she makes the decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's really
the you shoulds. Those are hard. That's hard. I think as when we become parents, we just like instantly add that phrase into our daily vocabulary of you should.
You should, you have to, I want you to. I have a whole list. I have a chapter in my book on strong-willed children, because I know about them. Things that are not effective. It's all about, it's not good or bad. It's all about what's effective. Am I getting the results I want, or am I not? What language is ineffective or effective? So that's what I'm a master of, is language and the impact, because I think that's from my own life. The language my mother used wasn't helpful, and I determined when I was a teenager that I was going to have a different relationship. So my book is really based on language. What's the words that you're using, and what's the impact? And to understand that your words come from your thoughts and your feelings.
Well, that book is called Ally Parenting, and I will link below a link to the book, also a link to the website and social media. So if you have any questions, or if you want to take advantage of what Cynthia offered for her 45-minute free consultation, please do that. So you can find that on the link below, wherever you're listening to podcast. Okay. And then before you go, just my one last question. Overall, out of all your experience, out of everything that you do every day to help parents, what's the one piece of advice you'd want to share with parents today?
I would say to believe in your children and support them for whatever path they have to go through, and encourage them, because that's what they need from you. When they don't believe in themselves, they need you to believe in them, and that will help them believe in themselves.
Very good. Well, Cynthia, thank you so much for all your time. I look forward to people reaching out to you and hopefully taking advantage of your 45-minute free consultation. I know now more than ever, us parents need to really get that foundation going, so we can have better conversations with our kids going forward.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Sarah.
Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you're hooked, you can subscribe to this podcast, follow along on social media at The Momma Stories, or visit the website, mommastories.com. And mamas, I love you.